All right, my friends, welcome back. I am so excited about this particular conversation because I am reuniting with a friend that I have not talked to or seen in ages. And I cannot wait for all of you to get to know her. She is an absolutely radiant person. And I'm just going to let her tell you more about herself. But to give you the baseline, this is Laura Fredrickson. She is the founder of the Institute of True Wealth. How much more resonant can you be with this show? Laura, I am so excited about this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mindy. And I'm so grateful and honored to be here today with you.
Yeah, this is
Thank you.
awesome. It has been a minute since we have hung out. We were hanging out in California. I don't even know what year that was, but you, me, Sean, and I just remember driving around in your Land Cruiser with him, and he was like, "Babe, I think we should get this kind of car. This is awesome." But
Great
apart from all
memories.
of that, apart from
Yeah.
all of that, let's talk about you and your work to give our audience a little peek into your world. Can you talk a little bit about what you are up to?
Yes, well, I have been facilitating people on the path of what I call the remembrance of their own true worth, their essential value, and empower them to know that they can truly create lives of passion, of purpose, and of prosperity. So for me, true wealth is really first and foremost a foundation of emotional well-being, and of course, sharing our gifts with the world. So the intersection of those two things, I believe, is what each of us are being invited to embody and to move in the direction of, courtesy of the reset of 2020. So that is been a true joy for me over the last 23 years, is to facilitate that. And I do that through a new thought language that I've created called the Priceless Principles and Practices. So I've taken existing financial terminology, which continues to keep people caught up in the illusion that our security and our freedom and our happiness is in the external, whether that's in our bank accounts, our crypto accounts, in our relationships. And it brings people back home to self, base camp self.
So for those of you not watching this video on YouTube right now, I have this like huge smile on my face as you're speaking, because I'm like, yes, 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 like everything that you have said, especially that remembrance. I love that word so much, because isn't it always this dynamic between forgetting who we really truly are,
Yes.
and then like reminding ourselves. And what a beautiful offering to everyone that has the opportunity to work with you to help that process continue. That's amazing.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it is a journey of remembrance. And I always advocate when I work with people personally, or however they decide to join me on this journey of remembrance, it's reminding them that we're all born with the core information. The core wisdom would be the better way to say it.
Yeah.
And what we really came here to experience and to express in this lifetime. And I do feel that part of our journey is peppered with the contrast of the amnesia and the hallucination, that we are not whole unto ourselves, that we, for whatever reason, don't have the ability to create our heart's desires, to create lives that are truly meaningful, and to express the gifts that each of us have been given. I believe each of us are coded within our DNA, essential gifts and offerings in the world, that are meant to bestow to us reflections of what I call the appreciation currency of money. So for me, it is all about catalyzing that deep remembrance, so people really remember not only how worthy they are, not because of the things that they're doing, not because of their accomplishments, but because they exist. And innate within our existence is our worthiness. And so I believe that the journey of remembrance is really about activating within people that inner knowing that they are intended to share their gifts, to do so in the spirit of ease and grace, to partner with the energy that is, of course, creating worlds, that is blooming the flowers, spinning the world on its axis in perfect proximity to the sun, that those energies are here to support each of us to really be self-actualized, but more importantly, to enjoy the journey. And I know a lot of us that are, or have been, I'll speak for myself, that have been service driven. That has come at, with a lot of suffering, because I have oftentimes felt that my worthiness and my happiness has to do with how many lives I've positively impacted. So even that carries an element of quantifying my worth, quantifying my worth. And so there's many elements that are connected to, of course, the journey of remembrance. But those are some of them that I advocate and ring the memory bell on for people.
Yeah, I love that. I love the phrase too that you used, appreciation currency. Can you talk a little bit more about that idea?
Yes. Well, most of my work is around shifting people's core relationship with money, because I've found over the last 23 years that people's relationship with money is typically very unconscious. Money is driving people. It is, quote, I'm going to use quotation marks, air quotes. Money is robbing people of living lives of true joy, and money, of course, is innocent. It's our perception of it. As with all things, it's our belief of it. So when I work with people, I take them through a very powerful money ceremony, where I help them to identify and use ritual. I'm a ritualist. Ritual and ceremony is uniting intention with an action, and it's very powerful. It can catalyze a great deal of shifts. But one of the things that I do promote is people getting clear on what have been their predominant beliefs, and to then allow them to create a new relationship dynamic with money. So just as you would in any intimate partnership, creating a very conscious vow of how you're choosing to relate with money. And then I take people on a journey of, in that redefining of money, to define what is money. And it's fascinating because so many people have not taken the time. Of course, we've not been taught so far in our lives to turn within and to become intimate with what our core beliefs are and what is our relationship to the primary aspects of our life. But even that ability for people to step into clarifying less about what it was, because I don't promote so much of going down memory lane and regurgitating those elements that don't serve, but more, what are we choosing it to be going forward? How do we want to relate with a significant aspect of our life as humans? You know, if we're not on board with money, if we're not clear about that, there is a fundamental level of powerlessness that sort of reigns supreme, and here again robs people of their core level and feeling of freedom, because they don't feel empowered to shape and to craft their life in accordance to what is true and authentic for them. So appreciation currency is the term that I coined for my journey. And of course, people have their own sort of heartfelt renewed relationship dynamic with money once they go through the ceremony process with me. So that's my definition of money that lights my heart up. And I think it's all about what lights us up. What is the definition that has us feeling alive? And that, of course, always correlates to the true wealth component, the emotional foundation of freedom and fulfillment and empowerment. So.
Yeah, 100% to all of that. Now, as you know, having heard this podcast, I ask every single guest, what is your specific definition of wealth? I know you just talked about it a little bit in terms of this money idea and this relational aspect, but how would you define wealth?
Wealth for me is loving myself fully.
Oh gosh, that's it. That is it. Everything else is taken care of when that happens. That's amazing. Yes.
Yes, yes. And loving myself fully, and also being in, it begins with acceptance, but ultimately the celebration and the honoring of my entire journey.
Oof,
So
yes.
knowing that everything has unfolded perfectly, there has been divine orchestration, which is really promoting my evolution, or we could say my remembrance of who I truly am, because in this playing field of life, there is that element of contrast, like we were talking about earlier, the amnesia and the remembering, and the amnesia and the remembering. And I feel that if we so choose, we don't need to have a journey that's filled with amnesia and remembering. You know, sometimes my clients will come to me and they're like, yeah, but I have to have suffering in order to experience the joy. And I say, do you?
Really?
Because whatever you believe becomes so, and then that continues to promote more and more of the same. So, so for me, the true wealth and wealth really is about that deep reverence for my journey, for loving myself fully, and also to really interpret my life from a higher perspective of my soul's journey. So part of my suffering, a lot of my suffering has been when I'm taking things personally through my personality, and I'm forgetting, oh, there's actually an orchestration. There's something that is lying underneath this, you know, journey that is really there to promote my remembrance and to ultimately have me remember that God, source, spirit is flowing through me as me. It's not separate. I'm here to express that love, that knowing, that light in this incarnation in a way that fills me with joy first and foremost, and can encourage others to choose that for themselves, if they so choose. Of course, I'm not here to convince people, but if they choose it, then it's a blessing for me to be able to offer that inspiration. So.
Doesn't that make it so much easier for those of us that aren't, or who recognize that it's not like our job to convince
Yeah.
people or force people into some whatever religion or belief or whatever? It's like, hey, you all have the choice. We all have the choice.
Mhm.
Such a relief. So, Laura, we have to get into this story that you told me once. This is just in what we're talking about with your journey specifically, and having that higher soul perspective on the things, the events, the people, the places that have occurred in your life. But truly, when I heard your story, I thought, this is one of the wildest stories that I might possibly have ever heard. And yet, you are such a powerful example of forgiveness, acceptance, moving through the challenging aspects of life. And I wondered if you would share that story with our audience.
Of course. Yeah, of course, I'd be honored. So my path to remembering was really initiated when I was 29. Both of my parents were very much caught up in the illusion that their freedom, their happiness, and their security resided in their bank account and in the stock market. I'll back up just a little bit because I feel this context is important to share. So my parents got pregnant with me unexpectedly. My mother was on the pill. So I always say that's how committed I am to being here. I think it's what, a 99.7% success rate for women that are on the pill to
Yeah,
not get
you
pregnant.
were coming through.
I'm like, I'm coming in. But when they got pregnant, they were very, very, very poor. And they made a vow to evade taxes as a survival mechanism, to be able to afford to take care of an unexpected baby, me. And in that vow, they said that if they ever got caught, they would end their lives. Now, this vow, and of course, what we resist persists. And although monetarily speaking, it was interesting because my father and mother were never fundamentally free. They always had this backstory and concern, of course, that their fears would manifest, that something would come to fruition around that. So I think it was 30 years-ish later, my father shared with me that the feds and the FBI had been to their home. My father kept all of the incriminating evidence, which is kind of an interesting thing in and of itself, self-fulfilling prophecy. And he had shared with me that they had been evading taxes, and he shared with me, of course, about what had occurred and all that I had just shared with you. And then he said, and we're set to be in court in 6 weeks. We have no intention of being in court. We're basically, it's not a question of if we end our lives, it's how we end our lives. I, of course, went from being in my body and having, my life, which was pretty good at the time, to just completely checking out. I remembered saying to them, go to my cabin. I was living in Colorado. Don't do anything dramatic, or I'm calling in to work. I'll come be with you. And I spent time with them in my cabin, and my boyfriend at the time, I'll never forget him asking my dad, how can you do this to Laura? How can you F her up for the rest of her life? And how can you be so selfish? And my dad said to John, who's more selfish, Laura for wanting us to stay on a planet we no longer want to be on, or us for wanting to complete our lives in the way that we choose? There was something very powerful in the ability to hear that, because it let me know that they were of sane mind. Because when I heard it, I thought, wow, okay, maybe I need to commit them. Maybe I need to get them somehow connected to a psychologist. This was the first time, and actually I want to add that my father was atheist, so I was never raised in any sort of religion. And I share this because my father had the experience of doing everything on his own. So when he was faced with this challenge, he didn't really have anyone to turn to. And I was actually guided in that moment. I remember praying for the first time. I didn't know what I was praying to, but I went and sat on my stairs, and I just said, oh my God, if there is I need help in this moment, I don't know what to do. 2 minutes later, I heard a whole caravan of FBI agents coming up my driveway to my remote cabin, and they arrested my parents. Now, this ended up becoming a blessing, because it also separated my mom and my dad, because my mother was very much under the spell of my father. He was a very strong personality, and he had somewhat brainwashed her. I had witnessed that, because I was like, surely there's solutions, and I could see her light up, and he was basically saying, no, there's no solutions. This is the only solution. So having the feds come at that time was such a godsend, because it gave them some space. And I'll make this part short, but when they were released, I was on a journey of, I think it was about another 6 weeks, where I was in courtship with them. And I was championing them. You can get through this. We're family. You're not alone. There's, something better is in store. And I saw my mom light up around the possibilities of actually true liberation, because even though they'd stockpiled all of this money, their mindset, their perception was still imprisoned. They were in what I call the material, the shackles of material preoccupation, the mental shackles of fear and concern and worry. So went by, and ultimately my parents did take their lives. 9 months went by, they disappeared. I didn't know really what had happened to them. That was an extremely challenging time for anyone else who has experienced suicide. It's not a subject that's talked about much. It's not a subject that's spoken about openly, and certainly not the dual suicide of 2 people over a tax case. So that was where my real grief and aloneness set in. I didn't really have too many people to talk to about it, but I did find my way. I spent a lot of time in nature, and I was able to start to feel some relief. I did receive some support around all of that. Went into my parents' home, let my grief be known and felt, released a lot of that. I gave myself a shelf life for that, of like, okay, I'm going to be in my grief for 6 weeks. I'm going to let myself feel that all that I need to feel, and then I'm going to move on in my life. And I ended up battling the IRS. I came into a lot of money very suddenly. I went down the same path as my father, trading in the stock market, swept up in the illusion that if I can just make more money, I'll be more secure. And I was gifted the tech collapse in the year 2000. I lost everything. And I am emphasizing the word gifted. I lost everything I'd made in their estate. My home was in foreclosure. I was in an abusive relationship because of all the money stress. Again, dealing with the money stress piece. And I had a forest fire that was about to consume. So that was really the inception of my journey of true wealth. The catalyst was, of course, my parents' choices and everything that had unfolded. And I became suicidal myself. I had so much shame. I had so much guilt around losing what I thought was the last connection to my parents, was their money. And I ended up activating what I feel is one of our superpowers, which is vulnerability. And I shared with my dear friend at the time that I had been plotting my suicide for 3 months, that I couldn't go on. I shared all of my most intimate, shameful parts. And just that act of admitting what I was experiencing felt like such relief. I went and sat on my couch, and in front of me on a coffee table was a book on Chinese numerology, which is the science of numbers. I didn't know anything about numbers. I didn't just science of numerology. I didn't know anything about it. I believe it was absolutely divinely orchestrated, this book. It was a small book. I looked it up. There's 9 distinct paths, each with their own theme. Mine is a path of a 9, which is let go and let God. In the first paragraph, it's summarized in detail everything I had just experienced. You may lose money in the stock market. That was the opening line.
Okay, check.
Check. You may be facing a natural disaster. Check. You may lose loved ones. Check. If you can surrender and let go, you'll have the most incredible experience full of purpose, adventure, and happiness beyond your wildest imagination. So I embarked on a journey of surrender. I didn't even know what that meant. I was so upstream in my own current of well-being. But I knew in that moment that I did need to kill myself, but I needed to leave my body out of it. And what needed to die were my operating systems, the way I was relating to my own worth and security and happiness and freedom. So I spent a lot of time in nature at a yellow lab. I was hiking 14,000-foot peaks. I was swimming in rivers and lakes. And I just started to receive transmissions, downloads, uploads, sideloads, whatever you want to call it, of a deep knowing of the essential nature of life, which is bountiful, which is abundant, and ultimately remembered the power of my perception and the power of gratitude. So I started to focus on, at sometimes it was literally that my feet were on the ground. It would be that the sun is shining. And I started to cultivate a focus on gratitude, which is what I teach and share and promote, which I know so many of us are on to, the power of gratitude. And my life started to shift and change. And here I am 23 years later, living the prophecy of that book and sharing my journey of how I went from suffering and alchemizing all of those experiences into ultimately my dharma and my purpose. and my joy.
Laura, I even know that story and it still gave me chills to hear it again. And then when you said this, I did need to kill myself, but leave my body out of it.
Mm.
What a powerful, amazing perspective and such wisdom of like all that old gunk, right? Just like
Yeah.
that's the part of us that needs to die so that we can live in this creative, joyful, appreciative state. Now, you are living in Bali in what appears to be, now we haven't talked in a long time, but what appears to be just like heaven on earth type of paradise situation. Can you talk about your current setup?
Yes, I'd love to, but I want to just say one thing. I loved what you said about the gunk, and anyway, so it's a perfect bridge. It's our perspective that it's gunk, that it's crap, that it's because it's about repurposing that. So one of my symbolisms, which I'm so connected to, is the lotus, which my home is surrounded with lotus ponds that I've created, because the lotus is such a symbolic reference. They take the murky waters. That is the ultimate fertilization for these incredibly beautiful blooming flowers. And I feel that we have the ability to compost and to repurpose all of the murky, sort of mucky, gunky waters of our journey to fertilize our bloom. I know that may sound a little, but I believe it with
No, I
all of my
totally agree
heart
with you.
that
Absolutely
that,
agree. I love
yeah.
that.
So all of those experiences are purposeful and full of soul rich nutrients to ultimately propagate our most blooming, happy, expressed life.
Yeah.
And so that piece I wanted to share. So for me, Bali is heaven on earth, and I have to do my own practices, and I have to continue. I always tell people I'm a work in progress. If I go into my own form of amnesia, despite the environment, if our environment gets focused on lack and scarcity, or self-deprecation, I can be looking at my paradise experience here. I'll just turn it so everyone can see.
Gorgeous.
And I cannot necessarily always feel the blessings and the bounty of my life if I am focused on all the things I haven't done yet, or how many more people could benefit from my wisdom, or, why haven't I done that? It's like, whatever that mentality is, I always say where we place our attention is where we will dwell. That is our home. We can create heaven or we can create hell. So I can be living in the most gorgeous of surroundings, and that can vary for everyone. My heaven on earth doesn't necessarily mean it's yours or someone else's, but I do believe that abundance and true wealth is a mindset, and so is beauty and paradise. So
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's get into some of the details. I'd love to know more about you so that people who are listening to your story and they're like, holy cow,
yeah.
she has created this amazing life. How might I do that? So I have an acronym called HERB. I ask all of my guests about this, and I want to walk you through the different letters. The H in HERB stands for habits. What habits do you have on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis that keep you in your state of remembering who you are and what you are?
Yes. I do gratitude offerings every day. So to my ancestors, to the earth, to the beautiful animals I get to share life with, and to myself. So I do a gratitude practice 4 days a week. I believe we don't have to be perfect, but the majority of the time is essential. And then I have my own personal mantras that I read. So Part of my practices that I guide people through is what I call flipping the script. So I help them to utilize their emotional body to identify the core limiting beliefs, shift those to personal mantras. So I have my own personal mantras that I utilize and that I review to keep my mindset in alignment with my core truth and my worth.
Nice. So the E stands for environment. We've talked about that to some extent. Is there anything else, maybe like interior to your house? How do you set up your space, or maybe even a car? I don't even know if you have a car in Bali, but anywhere you are, office, life, home, etc. What types of things create the most impacting, like positively impacting environment for you?
Well, I always gift myself fresh flowers. I'm not going to turn the camera again. So I always have flowers, orchids. I think it's very important to beautify the home. I also do feng shui in the space. So that piece is very important. I work a lot with sage, Palo Santo. As I mentioned before, I'm a ritualist, and frankincense, which is sage is, of course, been medically proven to not only clear literally germs from the space, but shamans and know the importance of going into the corners of the space, doorways, just freshening up the energy. It's not just the action of it, it's keeping that mindset of only joy and ease and love is welcome here. I invite beauty and grace into the space. Whatever that powerful declaration is really beautiful. You could use incense, you could light a candle, anything that brings that feeling of intention into the space. I drive an NMAX, so it's a little bit smaller than a motorcycle. Around Bali, I use it as my practice of presence.
I bet.
And I love it. I love it so much. I just, when I get onto the NMAX, I set the intention that I'm present and I'm aware, and I, of course, intend safety and ease for my journey. So.
Nice. I want to say a note about frankincense, and then you probably actually know more about this than I do, but Sean and I would use frankincense so often to stimulate a meditative, I would say more powerful meditative experience. For some reason, when we would heat that essential oil, it was like we were able to drop in so quickly and so much deeper to this just presence, mindfulness, whatever. And I don't know why that is about frankincense, but I just wanted to mention that to our audience. And like I said, you might know even more about it.
Yeah, it's the highest vibration on
Gosh,
the planet.
it is.
That resin is the highest vibration. So that's why it allowed you to move into those other dimensions or to drop in. So it's very, very powerful. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. All right, cool. So let's move on to the R. The R is resources, and resources could be books, programs, courses, whatever it might be. But I'm curious for you, what resources have you found that have really impacted your own journey and then you might recommend to others?
I'm going to have maybe a unique answer, and I'm not a big reader. I don't read. I have rarely read any books. My greatest resource is nature.
Oh, yes. Love it.
So I go to nature, the sounds of nature. And for those that may not have nature to access, literally putting in, nature sounds, dropping into that space. For me, nature has really been that. And that you asked me about books, and what was the other thing with the resource question?
Could be courses or programs or even people that have influenced you.
Well,
Whatever.
people, I would say one of the most resonant experiences I've ever had with another being, and I didn't get to meet him in the flesh, is Ram Dass.
Yeah.
To me, he is I still feel his presence very much. He actually helped to co-author one of the chapters in my book, but he is profound, embodied, heart, chakra, compassion, light. Like, I can listen to him. Of course, he is a man who had his beautiful journey of all of his vulnerabilities too. But his films, Fierce Grace, Going Home. I never read Be Here Now, interestingly enough, because I don't like to read books, but he is just a profound example of what I would call, he's a humble giant to me, a spiritual giant that is just so incredibly humble and beautiful, beautiful being. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So the B in herb stands for beliefs, and we have talked about many of them so far, but really focused in on what are the key beliefs or maybe worldviews that you hold that just continue to be like maybe the most, because I know you have lots and lots of them, as many of us do, but which ones are maybe the ones that you go back to the most, or maybe that you need to remind yourself of the most? Like, which ones are those key impact ones?
Mm-hmm. I am whole. When I go within, I never go without.
Love that.
What I focus on expands. My perception creates my personal reality. What I appreciate appreciates in my life. And every being's journey is perfect. They are exactly where they need to be in their own journey of remembrance. There's nothing to fix, there's nothing to change. And that includes the current status of the world. And I know we're in such legendary times of transformation. And I think as we are standing witness to the rubble. So if we think about the old world, almost like the Berlin Wall when it came down, we're still in that zone.
Yeah.
But for me, it's about the importance of keeping focused on what it is we are creating. So remembering that each of us, whether it's bringing love to the dishes that we're cleaning in our sink, bringing love to ourselves, it's all so essential because our vibration is our contribution as we create the new earth, which is really one that works for everyone, and people remembering that each of our perceptions is creating our realities and therefore our collective reality. So those are some of the nuggets that have been active for me in the last couple of months, for sure.
Yeah, it's so fun for me to get to talk to all of the guests on this show because there's always so much resonance in everything that you all are saying. And y'all don't know each other. So it's so great to just have like the same themes coming up again and again and again. It's just so, so powerful. So thank you for that. What do you find are some of the biggest challenges or obstacles with people that come to you to heal that relationship with money, to work through some of whatever they're going through? What are some of their sticking points that you see just coming up again and again?
The themes of people that come to work with me are people that feel powerless in their life. They don't feel that they can make money doing what they love. And a lot of them are caught up in traditional therapy. So I say that with delicacy because not all therapy is exactly the same. But a lot of people come to me quite frustrated because they've spent so much money in therapy and nothing is fundamentally changing.
Yep.
So those are Yeah, so those are some of the key elements that they bring. And also just a feeling of that they won't be able to free themselves from, I'm going to say ancestral curses, but that sounds too strong. But I believe one of the things that we're moving through as a collective is people being able to really know that they can free themselves. They can create a reality that serves them, that is true for them. It doesn't matter what their parents did, what their grandparents did, all of that has actually been a portal. It's been a gateway. It's laid the foundation for who they have become. But I feel we're in a time now where a lot of people, because of the level of awareness that's been activated over these last couple of years, people are, through their suffering, through their frustration, really saying, kind of enough. And I'm ready to be on a path of solution. And life is precious, tomorrow is not promised. And so there is very beautiful activation and excitement and belief, a positive expectation that people have, that change can be there for them, that they can shift their realities. So
yeah, I started smiling as soon as you said that, because I've had just testimonial after testimonial. People come to coaching with me and it's the same story. Like, I've been in therapy all this time and it did maybe nothing. And what I do, it's not therapy, but somehow it unlocks whatever it is for them. And you're doing that same thing. So I totally get it. Totally appreciate that. One thing that I would like to ask from you is, if you were to speak directly to the heart of the listener right now, what inspiration, motivation, encouragement, whatever it is, what might you say to that person?
You are loved. You are worthy. Every single experience you have ever had is perfect. And the best is yet to come.
That is awesome. And it's so true.
It's true if they believe it's true. So the last piece I would share on that is, start focusing on what is working in your life. Little by little, every day, practice that in your mind. Exercise the appreciation muscle. It has atrophied. What I will promise 100% is, if you're not feeling fulfilled, if you're not happy, it's because more of your attention is more powerful than your intention, has been going on to the subjects and the illusion of lack, scarcity, what isn't working, which promotes feelings of fear. And then this neutral vibrational force, the law of attraction, is delivering to you more evidence of what you've been focusing on. But when you start focusing on what you're grateful for, the number one benefit of that is you'll experience true wealth, which means you're going to start to feel better, and you're attracting based on how you feel. So the better you feel, the better your environment is going to start to become. And the better you feel, the better it gets, and the better it gets, the better you feel. But it takes 30 days for manifestation. So you're going to step into a period of time where you'll have to be vigilant. The reason why a lot of things don't change for people is they keep focused on their external reality, which is not pleasing to them.
And what, Laura, I can't get all the money right now?
Yeah, and you don't need all the money. Yeah, exactly. And even the orientation. Exactly. And one of the questions I would ask your audience to sit with, which was a game changer for me when I was in that point of realizing I needed to kill myself and leave my body out of it. Is there anything more valuable to you than how you feel? That question, the answering of that question shifted the trajectory of my life to be one of true wealth. But if we're in that place of, I need all the money and I need the thing out there and I need the relationship and why that, it's like, yeah. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if our listeners are as in adoration of you as I am, where should they go to find out more about you, potentially work with you, whatever it is that they want to, learn from you? Where would you send them?
LauraFredrickson.com. And they can also find me on Instagram and Facebook as well. And I have a book called A Journey Back to Self for those who have lost their way. That is on Audible. I have an audiobook that I recorded.
Nice.
And also it's on Amazon, the hardback, softback, whatever, of the actual book. So.
Perfect. Well, I will link to all of those things. So if you listening want to figure out where to find Laura, just go to lucra.com. You can find the show notes for this episode. All the links will be there for you. Laura, I cannot thank you enough because one, like I said, I adore you. And two, so much just important truth that you had to bring forth from your own experience, from, your own struggle. And what I said this to you even before we started the recording today, you are such a great example of going through all of that, like huge, huge, wild story, and then creating what you have created, which is joy, abundance, all of this good stuff, beauty. So truly, thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Well, just know everybody has the ability to alchemize their suffering into true wealth.